Joining me over the phone this morning from U.S. Coin Capital, it's Fred Dashevsky. Good morning, sir.
Well, good morning. Happy to be with you.
We had a conversation just recently. We were talking kind of off the air and talking about the status of kind of money in the U.S. and what people should be doing. And it was an interesting topic, and that's where I kind of wanted to bring you on and introduce our listeners to some of these topics. I guess, first off, who are you with and what kind of experience do you hold?
Sure. My company is U.S. Coin Capital. I've been a professional coin dealer now for 37 years. I've gotten started in this business as a young pup in my early 20s. After a period of time when I discovered there have been some fundamental changes to the monetary policies in the United States during my lifetime. I remember as a young kid when we used to have silver making up the gold and silver, the coins that we used to use as circulated change. Dimes and quarters and half dollars were actually minted in silver. In 1964, they removed that. And in 1971, Richard Nixon announced that the United States was no longer going to back any of the paper currency.
We had a conversation just recently. We're talking on this morning from U.S. Coin Capital. It's Fred. Joining me over the phone this morning from U.S. Coin Capital, it's Fred Dashevsky. Good morning, sir.
Well, good morning. Happy to be with you.
We had a conversation just recently. We were talking kind of off the air and talking about the status of kind of money in the U.S. and what people should be doing. And it was an interesting topic, and that's where I kind of wanted to bring you on and introduce our listeners to some of these topics. I guess, first off, who are you with and what kind of experience do you hold?
Sure. My company is U.S. Coin Capital. I've been a professional coin dealer now for 37 years. I've gotten started in this business as a young pup in my early 20s. After a period of time when I discovered there have been some fundamental changes to the monetary policies in the United States during my lifetime. I remember as a young kid when we used to have silver making up the gold and silver, the coins that we used to use as circulated change. Dimes and quarters and half dollars were actually minted in silver. In 1964, they removed that. And in 1971, Richard Nixon announced that the United States was no longer going to back any of the paper currency it printed with any physical gold and silver. And honestly, I was too young to really understand what that meant, but somehow it struck me fundamentally that there was a flaw in this rationale. Like, why was it good enough from the 1790s when we first started the first money in America to have a gold and silver standard, and then suddenly in 1971 we make this decision to remove it?
When we're looking at that removing of the standard, what does that actually mean on the base? So the money that I'm carrying in my pocket and in my wallet right now, what kind of backing does that have?
Well, it's interesting. The Founding Fathers were really concerned about a number of things when we won the Revolutionary War. You can imagine now we are a new nation and we fought this war. We've succeeded in successfully removing ourselves from the greatest power on earth, which was England, Great Britain. And now we have this new country. We have to set up a new government and a new monetary system. And the Founding Fathers were really more concerned about bankers than they were about standing armies. So they insisted that all the money in the United States be physically backed by gold and silver. They actually put it in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 10, no state shall make anything but gold and silver tender for payment in debt. And the idea was that that money that you're carrying around was never just supposed to be a piece of paper backed by what it is now, which is the good faith and credit of the United States government. It was supposed to be redeemable at your discretion for physical gold and silver. And that actually was the case in the United States for almost the first 200 years of our history.
So when we're talking about this, you always hear stories of, Fort Knox and all this gold that's kind of sitting there that is the basis of all monetary transactions within the nation. Is Fort Knox still there, or are we just printing paper to our heart's content?
Well, Fort Knox used to be the storage facility for the United States. That was actually shifted over to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, and that became the storage place where all the gold is now physically stored. And that is the case now, that there is nothing backing that paper money except the good faith and credit of the United States government. That has been the case since 1971. And it creates a fundamental problem for people who are saving money, because what it allows for is the creation of additional paper money to be printed any or every time the government runs up deficits or debts and it doesn't have the money to pay. It can just simply print additional capital through the Federal Reserve System and then issue that money and put it into circulation, and that dilutes the value of the savings that people hold. And unfortunately, this is a detrimental problem that the American public is facing in the current era. We've never seen such a massive increase in the amount of money in circulation than what we've been experiencing the past couple of years. It actually started back at the end of George W. Bush's administration with massive government deficits, but it absolutely exploded when COVID kicked in. We've literally seen, they count the amount of money in the system, in the circulation. They have these statistical data that gets a little convoluted, but they look at the money supply, the amount of money actually floating around. And that has increased in the past year by almost 40%. It's the single largest increase in the money supply in American history outside of World War II, which again is kind of disconcerting for those people that are trying to save money in the form of paper dollars, because these paper dollars will progressively then buy less goods and services as we move forward, as they get consistently diluted.
When we look back to pre-1971, are dollars, coins, U.S. money prior to that date, are they worth more than money that's printed now, beyond just the rarities and things of that nature? But does it hold greater value?
Oh, absolutely. Up to 1964, we minted silver coins. So any dimes or quarters that anybody might have now, if you look at the dates and they're dated 1964 and earlier, those are actually made of silver. They're worth about 20 times their face value, simply not only because of the silver content, but also because obviously we can't go back in time and mint any more of them. So there is this fixed supply issue as well. But most of their value actually still resides in the fact that they're minted of metal. Unfortunately, when it comes to gold, we stopped producing gold coins in 1933. But up to that point, if you had a $20 paper note, you could walk into a Federal Reserve Bank, and I know this is kind of hard to envision these days, but imagine that you could walk into a Federal Reserve Bank with a $20 paper note. You could demand that they hand you, and they would, a $20 gold coin, which is a 1-ounce U.S. gold coin minted by the United States government. But since 1933, we stopped producing gold coins. We outlawed the public's ownership of gold until 1971, when Nixon released the standard against the U.S. dollar. He then subsequently allowed the public to purchase gold again, and the price at that time was $35 for an ounce of gold.
When you're doing your coin trading and trading this currency, what are you seeing? I would imagine it's a lot of these more rarer coins and things, but how far back is the bulk of your work at U.S. Coin Capital?
Well, we go back to the very first United States coins. Now, after the war ended, the Revolutionary War, it took a number of years before the government was established, and we set up a monetary policy, created the first money system, and by 1792, we started to mint the first coin. 1793, we began to produce the first gold and silver pieces in the United States. So I actually deal with inventory that goes back to those dates. Although, as you pointed out, when you get back that far in history, those are excessively rare and very, very valuable, way beyond their metal content. In fact, there was recently a sale for $19.5 million for a single gold coin. Believe it or not, it was from 1933 because it was the only one from that date that remained available. The rest of them were melted and destroyed. So, rarity clearly has a value. But most of what we tend to work with are, and I know this is going to sound oxymoronic, but they're more common rare coins. In other words, they're old, they can't be minted anymore, but they're more readily available because the quantities of the minted were large enough that they tend not to sell for too much more than the metal content. And these are the kinds of coins our investor clients are accumulating kind of as a, let's call it a counterbalance. They kind of accept the idea that the government's going to keep spending money we don't have. There doesn't seem to be any end in sight. And this is not a political statement. This is not a Democratic issue. It's not a Republican issue. No matter who's in power, governments tend to spend more money than they take in. We're just setting records now at the rate we do that. So our customers are looking to own these physical gold and silver coins, again, to give them a hedge. As that paper dollar gets weaker, these gold and silver coins go up in value and give them wealth protection. It's the reason, silver used to be $3 and $4 an ounce, and now we're looking at, $28 silver, and gold used to be $200 and $300 an ounce, and today we're looking at almost $1,800 for an ounce of gold.
It seems like every time there's any sort of nationwide discussions, be it pre-presidential change, any sort of strife, any sort of thing, that you see a lot of people coming out and warning people to invest in gold, invest in silver, to kind of, again, hedge your bets and have that real metals in there in your portfolio. Is that more, or is that better for the portfolio than buying these, having these coins, or is it the gold in the coins, or is it the meaning behind the gold and the printed that is, would you say, is more important? Is it just having gold or having these coins?
That's a good question. The way I look at it is this: I think any physical form of gold and silver fares far better than a paper note. I accept the notion it doesn't really matter, but there are definitely distinct advantages to the coins as opposed to, the what we call bullion, which would be the bars or the bricks or the round things that are not actually money. So with the coins that we deal with, we're talking about things that are constitutional money of the United States. I think American citizens should own constitutionally lawful money of our country. The distinct advantages are basically twofold. The first one, again, is that they are fixed in supply. Since they can't go back before 1933 and produce any more of these, we already know we're dealing with a supply that's absolutely forever fixed and guaranteed, never to increase. So if you own these physical gold or silver coins, you have something where the supply is already locked, and that helps them appreciate in value. The second distinct advantage between the coins side and, let's say, just the bars and the bricks is the way the government views them. The government has federally regulated the world of bullion, which means that if, for example, you owned a bar of gold and sold it, I would have to take your Social Security number. I would have to file by federal law 1099-B with the IRS. That includes your name, your address, your Social Security number, what you sold to me, and that all becomes income to you unless you can justify your original cost basis. The coins before 1964 in silver and before 1933 in gold are not included in that federal regulatory nonsense, which means that they treat you like an adult. We can conduct commerce with each other. I'm not required to file any forms with anybody. We can conduct our transactions privately. But I look at the distinct advantage of a fixed supply asset versus, something they can continue to produce as a huge distinct advantage for investors who are putting these things away, because not only would it potentially be the increase in the underlying metal itself going up, but also as these coins become scarcer, they will have a little value more and more above the metal content that can continue to grow. And that's a great advantage for the investor.
What about some of these novelty coins that we see usually around 3 a.m. on infomercials and things of the new gold freedom coin or the eagle coin or insert novelty here? I'm just assuming from just based on when they're airing and just the rhetoric kind of behind the commercials that those are really, you're just buying gold, and you're probably buying gold at a higher price than that gold is technically worth. Am I off on that assumption?
No, you've got it right on. You hit the nail on the head, as they say. I mean, there are all sorts of ways to produce new gold coins, and again, I could put your picture on a coin, or my picture on a coin, or Elvis's picture on a coin. Well, of course, but how much of a market would there be for it for anybody else? And if you try to sell it in the future, would anybody recognize it as anything more than the metal it's made of? Probably not. So the idea is that even though you can produce all sorts of things with various images on them, does that necessarily give them a value? What I'm referring to are specifically coins that were minted as legal currency of the United States. This is government-issued money. This is the legal tender of our country, and that's why they carry the distinct value they do. It's legitimate.
Again, we're talking with Fred Dashevsky from US Coin Capital, and you can find out more at uscoincapital.com or on social media. It's an interesting topic to think about, that the value of our dollar, the money that you're carrying in your pocket, what is it worth beyond just the weight that it carries? One of the things I was wondering about was, what are other countries doing? I mean, post 1971, the U.S. kind of changed how we have that backing for our dollars and our coins. But are other countries still set in this gold standard, say the Canadian dollar or the German dollar or what have you? Are other people doing it differently still today?
No, interestingly enough, there isn't a central bank in the world anymore that backs its currency with physical gold or silver. They all pretty much face the same problem, that the ability to create money was an issue that these governments faced. And as their debts grew, they didn't have enough gold in reserve to print the amount of money they needed. So they were stuck. They couldn't expand their government programs. They couldn't run up the deficits because they couldn't create enough money. So they had to remove the standards. So as we stand today in the world, there is no central bank anywhere that has any form of physical backing to its currency. And all of the countries around the world the past several years are running on what they're referring to as stimulus packages, which is that the central banks in the United States, that would be the Federal Reserve, they are all printing massive amounts of money to stimulate economic growth because the economies are not growing by themselves sufficiently. So in order to keep the economies moving, these central banks have stepped in to play a bigger and bigger role in the nature of the economy. So all the banks around the world are doing the same thing. The dollar, the US dollar, remains the world's reserve currency because even though we are as a nation 31 trillion in debt and blowing through money at a pace no one's ever seen before, we're deficit spending now hundreds of billions of dollars a month, it is still that we are better than most of the other nations around the world, so people still rely on the US dollar. It seems almost absurd if you think about it just from a pure logic standpoint that anybody would accept a paper note that was completely unbacked. But since you can pay your taxes with it, and since you don't have any other options, we're simply forced to use this unbacked capital. Where I find it's dangerous is for people who are protecting savings, thinking 5 years from now. What is this dollar going to be worth if we keep printing trillions upon trillions? Would it buy the same amount of goods and services it buys today? How would people protect their wealth against this inevitable loss? This is the reason I believe diversification and ownership of physical gold and silver in the possession of the customer, this is what the key is that we deliver it directly to our clients, and I believe every American needs to have some part of their wealth in this physical form to protect against this inevitable weakness in these paper notes that are being printed everywhere around the world.
When we're looking at investing, of course, going to a trusted investment advisor and someone like US Coin Capital who can really work with you to make sure that you diversify your portfolio with gold and silver, how can people find out more about you, contact you, and get more information about how to add gold and silver to their financial portfolios?
Sure. I think the education side of this is critical, and we've dedicated ourselves to that for quite a long time. I really believe that people should ask questions. People should get a fundamental grasp and understand this before they do anything. Our toll-free number here at 800-878-2646, we have a well-trained staff, perfectly willing and able to help people understand the nature of how to acquire gold and silver coins, why to do that, but more importantly, how to do it properly. Not to get involved in a lot of the hype that surrounds this industry where people are calling for, as much as I see a problem in the dollar, I am not amongst those that believe the dollar's demise is inevitable. I don't think we're ever going to see a dollar that is completely worthless and that, we're going to be bartering on the streets with gold and silver coins to buy loaves of bread at a supermarket. I don't buy that fundamental premise. I do believe the dollar is going to get progressively weaker. So we do like to educate people. And again, people can reach us through our website, US Coin Capital. That is spelled like the building, so it's CAPITOL, uscoincapital.com. Or they can call us directly at 800-878-2646. That's 878-COIN.
Fred Dashevsky from US Coin Capital, thank you for joining us and educating us this morning.
My pleasure to be with you.